My name is Enda. I'm Head of Performance Rehabilitation in the Sports Surgery Clinic. I look after the ACL and groin programs as well as the residential athletes that come to stay with us in the clinic. I'm also carrying out my PhD in biomechanics after ACL reconstruction. When we're looking to analyse an athlete, we look to break them down into their component parts. We look at their anatomy, their posture, their static vector alignment and their motor patterns and neuromuscular control. We look at the strength and power and rate of force development on top of that, and then we combine it in the 3D biomechanics lab, looking at them performing multi-directional, multi-planar activities in a sport-specific fashion. The great thing about the 3D biomechanics is not only does it allow us to analyse the kinetics and kinematics around each joint, but it also allows us to look at how those joints interact with each other. So what we like to take them is in single plane movement patterns, hopping and landing in individual planes, and then progressing those in terms of the challenge, both in terms of the depth of the jump, the power output, and the degrees of difficulty needed to carry out the task. A lot of what we're finding is that there's huge overlap between injury prevention, rehabilitation and performance enhancement. Brendan's paper outlined that the performance deficits when cutting centred around trunk sway, pelvic drop, foot position and ground contact time, and a lot of those are very common biomechanical deficits in what we're seeing in our groin and our ACL cohorts as well. So there's a huge overlap between improving an athlete during rehabilitation and restoring them to optimal biomechanical performance for their sport as well. I think a lot of the time the middle part of rehabilitation is well covered. People do a lot of strength exercises, do a lot of basic neuromuscular control, but very often they don't look at the interaction of the multiple joints together in more complicated movements, and they don't progress those through both from the gym setting out into the field setting, looking at high speed, high challenges, multi-directional activities and re-educating those movement patterns before letting the athlete back to play. The initial data that we've got on these athletes shows huge variability and no degree of predictability in terms of time from surgery, especially in sagittal plane control when you're looking at trunk sway, pelvic drop and knee valgus, further reinforcing the fact that timeline-led progression through ACL rehabilitation is extremely flawed, and the need to really be very individualised and specific, both in terms of where an athlete's deficits lie and the programmes and developments you're going to give them to work on from there.